Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the games we all play. And trust me, some of the history is hidden, and some of it is downright shocking.
Think about it. How do you settle a simple argument? Who gets the last slice of pizza? Who has to pay for coffee? There's that one go-to method we've all used to just settle it, quick and fair.
Yeah, I'm talking about rock, paper, scissors. But here's the thing, this super simple game has a history that's way more complicated and way older than you probably think. It wasn't always about, rocks and paper. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to trace the wild journey of the world's most famous tiebreaker. And this story starts with ancient drinking games and ends up at, believe it or not, high-stakes art auctions.
So the game we know today, it didn't start with stuff you find around the house. Nope. It actually began in China, and it was a battle between animals. You had the frog, which eats the centipede, which kills the snake, and the snake, which, you guessed it, eats the frog. Then, when it got to Japan, it got even more complex. It turned into this whole social dynamic between a fox, a village headman, and a hunter, before finally it got simplified into the version that just took over the entire world.
And this is where it gets really fun. People took the basic idea and just ran with it, creating some seriously wild local versions. Like in Indonesia, you've got an earwig that can take down an elephant just by crawling into its ear. In Germany, they added a well that beats both the rock and the scissors. And of course, who could forget pop culture's contribution? The legendary Spock, who smashes scissors and vaporizes rock.
Okay, so you'd think it's all just random, right? A 1 in 3 shot. Well, a study at Zhejiang University looked at 360 players and found, nope, there are clear patterns. Players tend to stick with the move if it wins, and they switch if it loses. But the biggest takeaway? People have a favorite go-to move to start with.
And that little fact reveals a really cool psychological quirk. See, rock is the most common throw, by far, especially with men, who maybe subconsciously connect that fist shape with strength. So what does that mean for you? Well, it means that leading with paper actually gives you a slight statistical edge. It's not just a game of chance, it's a game of psychology.
And believe me, this isn't just a game for the playground. Back in 2005, you had 2 huge auction houses who couldn't agree on who got to sell a massive $20 million art collection. So what was their solution? You guessed it, a single game of rock, paper, scissors. The winner threw scissors, which beat paper, and just like that, they won the rights to that incredibly lucrative auction. Insane, right? Okay, so we've seen the strategy and the psychology of a simple hand game. But now we're going to take a really sharp turn. We're about to explore a time when entertainment meant something far more brutal and genuinely shocking.
Right, so this next section is about 2 so-called sports from European history. And I have to warn you, they are pretty disturbing by today's standards. This is the dark side of play.
Okay, first up, fox tossing. This was, believe it or not, a favorite game for the aristocracy. You'd have pairs of players standing in an arena, holding this long sling. A terrified fox, or sometimes a badger, would be released, and they'd have to time it just right to launch the poor animal as high as they could. The only goal was height. The fall, as you can imagine, was often fatal.
And the cruelty, it didn't always end there. We have this account from a Swedish diplomat who recorded his absolute horror watching the Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I and his whole court just walking through the arena with clubs and beating to death any of the injured animals that had somehow survived the toss.
Then there was another incredibly popular spectator sport, bear baiting. So imagine this. They'd take a bear, often they'd already filed down its teeth and claws, and chain it to a post in a big pit. Then they'd just unleash a pack of dogs on it. It was this brutal, bloody spectacle that was enjoyed by everybody, from the common folk all the way up to Queen Elizabeth I, who was apparently a big fan.
Thankfully, public opinion eventually started to turn. People began to see these spectacles for what they were, just pure cruelty. And in 1835, Great Britain passed the Cruelty to Animals Act, which finally put a ban on these and other blood sports. It was a huge moment, a real shift in how society thought about entertainment.
So, as society moved away from all that cruelty, did our love for weird contests just disappear? Nope. It just found new outlets. Less lethal for sure, but you could argue they're just as strange. Okay, you heard that correctly. Ferret legging. It apparently started with English miners, and it is a pure, raw test of pain tolerance. The rules are simple. You drop 2 live ferrets into your pants, tie your trousers shut at the ankles, and that's it.
The only goal is to withstand the scratching and biting for as long as you possibly can. And this is a key rule: you can't be drunk or on painkillers to numb the pain.
And this just perfectly illustrates human endurance, or maybe just pure madness. The world record, which was set in 2010 by former school headmaster raising money for charity, is an almost unbelievable 5 hours and 30 minutes. Just try to imagine that for a second.
All right, on to the World Championships of Wife Carrying. This is a real sport, born from an old Finnish legend about thieves who used to steal women from neighboring villages. And here, technique is everything. The winning move for over a decade was this bizarre but super effective Estonian style. It lowers the center of gravity and it frees up the carrier's arms, which is exactly what you need on that obstacle course. Okay, for our final stop, let's jump into the digital age. Where did video games really begin? The answer might not be what you think. It wasn't in some neon-lit arcade, but inside a national laboratory.
So, most people think Pong was the very first video game, but the real title actually goes to a game called Tennis for Two, which was created 14 whole years earlier. It was made by a physicist, William Higginbotham, not to make money, but just to liven up the open house at a nuclear research lab. He used an oscilloscope for the screen. It was a simple physics demo, but it was absolutely revolutionary.
So when you look back at all this, the history of games really shows us a fascinating and, yeah, sometimes pretty uncomfortable reflection of ourselves, doesn't it? Our games, they mirror our values, our creativity, our capacity for some pretty terrible cruelty, and our constantly changing idea of what's fun.
And ultimately, what we choose to do for fun says a whole lot about who we are as a society. Which really leaves us with a big question. As our technology and our culture keep changing, what are the games of the next century going to say about us?